Welcome to the Test Guild Automation Podcast, where we all get together to learn more about automation and software testing with your host, Joe Colantonio.
Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Today we'll be talking with Michael Mintz all about SeleniumBase, which is a Python framework for web UI testing, and I believe it has a brand new feature for visual validation as well. Michael specializes in web automation, test automation, business automation, and product strategy. And in his spare time, he somehow has developed SeleniumBase, which is now, I believe, used by companies like HubSpot. Really excited to talk about this. You don't want to miss this episode. Check it out. The Test Guild Automation Podcast is sponsored by the fantastic folks at Sauce Labs. Their cloud-based test platform helps ensure your favorite mobile apps and websites work flawlessly on every browser, operating system, and device. Get a free trial. Visit testguild.com/Sauce Labs and click on the exclusive sponsor section to try it for free for 14 days. Check it out. Hey, Michael, welcome to the Guild.
Thanks, Joe. How are you doing?
Awesome. Really excited to have you on the show today. This is something I've been looking at for a while, SeleniumBase, and I've been seeing a lot of tweets about this new feature around visual validation. But before we get into all that, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
All right. Well, I'm a software automation engineer. In my spare time, I build test automation frameworks, and right now, SeleniumBase is where I've been focusing everything. It's supposed to be the all-in-one automation framework to handle all sorts of testing, web automation, mobile automation, visual validation, and a lot more.
I'm always curious to know, in your spare time, you're doing this. Why? Why SeleniumBase? Why are you doing this?
Well, I saw that there was like a gap in the way the test automation world was. Like long ago, Selenium came in and it was revolutionary, and everyone started switching over to it from Mercurial and other types of tools way back more than 10 years ago. And that became the open source standard. And when I saw SeleniumBase, or Selenium actually, I saw that there were gaps that could be filled. Like Selenium by itself is an automation library, but it needed more, like a whole framework to wrap around it to make it even more powerful. And PyTest, which is a Python unit testing framework, seems to be the big missing piece to fill the gap so that you can take this powerful browser automation library that Selenium is and combine it with PyTest to make it a full, complete test automation framework to handle all sorts of various web automation tests.
Were you using any other languages before? Why go with Python? Was it just because you really enjoyed PyTest?
Well, yeah, I think, I don't know if you've ever used PyTest, but it's a fabulous unit testing framework, and it has a lot of stuff that's already built in, such as multi-threaded tests, test parameterization. There's tons of plugins that already exist for PyTest, so instead of having to reinvent the wheel, I could basically build SeleniumBase using existing PyTest plugins and use that in order to make it even more powerful.
So, Michael, I love how this is almost like a wraparound type of Selenium. This is a trend I've been seeing more and more of. And like you said, it's because Selenium is like an API. So you have to create everything from scratch. And usually people are really bad at developing anyway. But one thing I've noticed is a lot of times there's some flakiness that is caused when people write tests because they don't know how to use the right weights or anything like that. So is there anything in SeleniumBase that helps you create less flaky tests? I don't know if that makes sense, but...
Absolutely. So all the methods that are in SeleniumBase have wrapped Selenium methods and added extra reliability in there. So for instance, there's a method that's part of all the existing SeleniumBase commands called wait for ready state complete, which basically makes sure that the web page has completely finished loading. And then when it tries to interact with the elements on the web page, it'll automatically make sure that the element is fully visible before trying to click on it. And there are certain default timeout values that are set that, let's say, 6 seconds or 10 seconds that SeleniumBase will wait to give the element a chance to be fully visible before clicking on it. And of course, there are other common Selenium exceptions that you might encounter, such as element not interactable exception, or the element went out of scope because there's like a page reload, and SeleniumBase will automatically take all that into account and make sure that it'll try to get the element again in case it changed, so that you can still interact with it, click on it, type in text into the text field. It has the reliability built in so that you don't have to worry about that when you're creating your raw Selenium scripts.
Another thing that comes to mind is on the website, it says it's simplified code. Is it simplified code because you're using Python, or is the syntax even easier than the Selenium API?
The syntax is very I made it easier than the standard Python bindings for WebDriver. Essentially, if you want to click on the element, you just specify the CSS selector, and you can just do self.click the CSS selector, and that's it. And you'll click on an element. If you want to update text, by default, it's already specifying CSS selector, so you don't have to include that as you normally would if you were creating like a raw WebDriver script. So it uses a lot of default values to make it so that the lines of code that you have are going to be a lot smaller than they normally would be if you were using regular Selenium on its own.
People might be wondering, is this open source?
Yeah, SeleniumBase is 100% open source. You can go to the GitHub page where it's been getting very popular lately. It's now currently sitting at around 1,350 stars approximately. So a lot of people are using it. They're seeing various tutorials that I put on it. I recently added a tutorial for automated visual testing. So I essentially created a full, you might have heard of automated visual regression testing before, because other companies like Percy and Applitools have created similar things. I decided that the basis behind that is actually really simple. And just by pulling all the HTML from a web page and sorting it, and then doing a comparison between the baseline and the current version of it, you can easily tell if the layout has changed. So I basically made that open source, that whole thing, and it got really popular on Hacker News, and people upvoted it all the way into the top 10 a few days ago, and that's where all this new traffic came from. So people are seeing that SeleniumBase has all these tools that you might not find open source anywhere else, or other companies might be charging money for such a service. But with SeleniumBase, you have that all for free, and it gets pretty much the same job done if you've seen the examples and tried running them.
So I'm really intrigued about the visual piece, because I know other tools are out there that are open source, but they tend not to be as reliable as a tool like, say, Percy or Applitools. So how does this compare to like an industrial solution? Is it equal, or does it use pixels that trip it up if it's off by some? You know what I mean?
Yep, it uses so it's all open source. It uses HTML tags for comparison, not pixels, because pixels can be unreliable if you just change the width of the web browser. All of a sudden, that might change like everything. So instead of doing that, I basically grab all the HTML tags, the HTML properties and values, and I'm using that to compare everything. So there's actually the HTML. I use Python to create a list of HTML tags, the attribute names, and the attribute values. And if you can compare that using the example from SeleniumBase, you can see that, okay, if something changed, like they changed the layout, it's going to pick up a difference when you do the Python list comparison based on that data. And you'll be immediately able to say, okay, something changed. Is this a regression, or was this a website redesign? You don't know right away unless you look at the screenshot that is provided. And then you can say, okay, they just changed the layout, no biggie, or, oh, something broke. This is not supposed to be like that. And then you can call that a regression. So the tool is there to give you the comparison. And then it's up to you when something fails to say, okay, here's the screenshot that I got. Did something actually break? Or is this expected because someone redesigned the website and I need to reset the baseline?
So how does it work with reporting? If there is a failure, say visually, is there a report that's generated that's easy for people to, like you said, say, oh, this is now the new base going forward, or something like that?
That's right. If you go to the SeleniumBase examples folder, inside there's a visual testing folder and a README inside that. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of that page, you'll see an example report that shows the failures with the stack traces that show the differences in the layout comparison between the baseline and the current version. as well as a screenshot that was taken with the latest version of that.
So I believe this actually was a popular post on Hacker News. Was there anything that came out of the comments?
Yeah, there were a lot of comments there, and I also had a link to a YouTube video where I demonstrated all these things. And it's gotten mostly upvotes, and people were pretty pleased that it's basically taking what a lot of companies have charged money for as a service, and here's open source automated visual regression testing, and it has the reports. They're automatically generated for you when there's a failure. That's actually part of SeleniumBase. If you run a test and the test fails, it's going to automatically take a screenshot for you and put that in the latest logs folder. And if you're using the PyTest HTML report feature by adding --HTML equals report.html, you're going to get the report that has the screenshots and the stack traces all in a very pretty formatted report.
What would stop someone? I'm trying to think objections here. So one objection people usually have is they're really attached to Selenium. So I want people to know, maybe I'm wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong. This is just using Selenium WebDriver in the background, but you create a wrapper on top of it. So it is using the industry standard behind the scenes. Is that correct?
That's right. It's using Selenium behind the scenes. It's using PyTest behind the scenes. It's using functionality and features from both those two things combined with a lot of additional methods built in. So for instance, Selenium doesn't come with like a visual regression testing tool built in like you've seen here. PyTest doesn't come with like a true like web UI test framework with the unit test framework that it already has. Combining those things together and adding more Python methods around that to fill in the gaps, you've got something really powerful. And that's what SeleniumBase is trying to do. It's trying to get the best of both worlds, PyTest and Selenium WebDriver, and put it all together and make it so that tests are no longer flaky. You have additional features to do mobile testing from any regular web test. So right now, if you run a Selenium-based test using --mobile as the PyTest argument, it'll automatically spin up the mobile browser with default settings, and you'll have a test running just like that without having to do any additional work for that.
Does it work with Appium?
That's the thing. You don't need Appium anymore to do a mobile test. You can use the regular. So Selenium comes with a mobile device emulator built in that I guess not too many people have been familiar with or realize that you can basically alter that in order to make it like a full mobile testing, give it the full mobile testing capabilities. And then you no longer need Appium for the mobile device simulator. You can do everything with pure Selenium in that respect.
Okay, so everything Selenium and PyTest does, this does it, but it does it not better, but it does extra. So I assume that you can run against Selenium Grid, Sauce Labs, all the standard things you could do with Selenium.
Absolutely. I even have a web page, a README in here that shows you how to connect to your own Selenium Grid or a Selenium Grid such as Sauce Labs. If you go into the top level Selenium-based folder on GitHub and then click on Help Docs, at the top you'll see customizing testruns.md, which if you scroll down to that, it'll show you how to connect to, say, a Sauce Labs instance. You just do PyTest, the test you want to run, --server equals username :key at ondemand.saucelabs.com, and then --port equals 80. And it's going to take your existing Selenium-based test and run it against their grid if you've specified the correct like username, password, and all that.
So Michael, another thing people always ask is, does it support API testing? But because it's Python, I assume you can use any API testing library out there like Tavern and make it part of your test framework.
That's right. Since it's Python, you can import any Python library, and those Python libraries could use APIs. And just by using that, you can add API testing alongside your web tests.
So one thing it did call out was it integrates with MySequel, and I just wasn't sure. What does that mean? I mean, it has built-in database calls?
Actually, I can show you an example of that. So if you go to, again, the top level Selenium-based folder, you'll see that there is a link to build the passing just underneath the logo. So in the Travis example, Travis CI, at the end of that, if you click on, say, Python 3.6 or 2.7, which are two of the examples I'm running against, at the very bottom, you'll see a MySequel table where it's basically collecting all the results and from the tests that you just ran, and it'll put everything in a MySequel database so that you can later query it and say, okay, what tests did I run on this day? Because it'll have the start time, the run time, the browser that you were using, whether or not the test passed or failed, and a bunch more other details inside the table. And that can be very useful if you want to see how maybe tests have changed day to day. Like, okay, on this day, this particular test was failing, but on this day it was passing. Maybe there was a bug and it was fixed. It's all like you've got a lot of options for that. And with MySequel, you can basically store all your test runs in that. And the example is shown right there without even having to do it yourself, just by clicking on the Travis example from the GitHub README.
What other functionality is it that I may be missing that maybe people don't know about?
Let's see. So web testing, mobile testing. Let me jump to... actually, I have a document that shows all the SeleniumBase features. That's also part of the help docs section. So if there's a feature you don't know about, hopefully I listed it there. Essentially, we've got console scripts that can automatically convert your tests to use the page object model. You can take a older Selenium script using regular WebDriver and unit test and automatically convert it into SeleniumBase format. And I have a YouTube video for that. I can send you the link later. I don't think that I've linked that from the GitHub page yet, but essentially you can use a tool like the Colantonio recorder and click through a website and have it record actions. And then from Colantonio, you can export that into a Python unit test script. And once you've gotten that script where it's doing a lot of extra setup steps that you don't need, you can convert that to just a few lines of SeleniumBase code to do the exact same thing, which normally it might be 50 lines. You take out all the additional methods you don't need, and that becomes possibly like 10 lines. So there's that. There's also the command line interface. So if you just type SeleniumBase on the command line, once you've installed it, you'll see commands such as the ability to instantly spin up a Selenium grid on your local machine and a Selenium grid node along with that. So you just type in SeleniumBase grid node or grid hub start, then SeleniumBase grid node start, and all of a sudden you've got a Selenium grid and a Selenium grid node connecting to the grid hub, and you can run your test immediately from your Selenium grid. So that makes it really easy. A lot of other features include the ability to connect through a proxy server to test Chrome extensions, because you can easily specify a Chrome extension zip file or directory to load up alongside when you start running your tests. You can also change the web browser's user agent string, which is particularly helpful when you're running mobile tests. And once you have that, you can also change the mobile device metrics, which are width, height, and aspect ratio, which are also very useful with SeleniumBase. You can make JavaScript calls. There's a website tour builder where essentially there's a GIF of that. If you go to SeleniumBase top-level GitHub folder, then go to examples, tour examples, you'll see that you can just use the SeleniumBase JavaScript manipulator to take control of any website and add a website tour on top of it. So in the GIF that's playing on the page I just mentioned, it creates a website tour of, say, Google, where it'll tell you this button does this and this button does that, and then it'll do the same for the Google Maps page. So there's a lot of features in here that you might not be aware of, but it's really, really powerful.
How active is the community? How long has this been around? How often has it updated? Things like that.
Nights and weekends, I have time to update it. So I've been continually trying to give the latest abilities to it. For instance, on the day Microsoft announced its latest Microsoft Edge, which is a Chromium-based browser, I had support for that ready at the end of that day. I was ready for it because there was a beta. And once they released the full Microsoft Edge in January, I'm like, okay, Now I can use -- browser equals Edge on the command line, and now all your tests will run using the latest Microsoft Edge. So I've been updating SeleniumBase ever since. I guess it all sort of started way back in 2011, around the time WebDriver came out, or at least WebDriver was like the first real edition of WebDriver. And people said, this is flaky, this is a problem. And I'm like, all right, well, if we just wrap the methods and change them a bit so that we work around the flakiness so that it's no longer flaky, we can get a very powerful test framework out of this. And so ever since 2011, just been slowly improving on WebDriver. But SeleniumBase wasn't always open source. SeleniumBase was actually open sourced in 2014. So those features that 2011 on to 2014, the world would not have known about it. And the name SeleniumBase didn't even appear until 2014, 2015. It was just like a test framework on GitHub. And then I properly gave it a name. And then people started finding out about it as they saw what it could do and that it really improved the state of testing.
So, Michael, earlier in your intro, you did say you used to write, or you do write other frameworks. I did see on the site something about Master QA. What is Master QA?
So, Master QA, it's now a feature within SeleniumBase itself. It's basically a thing that combines automated QA with manual QA. There's an example from the SeleniumBase GitHub page. If you go to the top level folder, click examples, and then click on Master QA, you'll see a GIF that's playing right there that basically shows a pop-up when automation clicks some buttons, performs actions on a page, and you want a human to basically say, okay, the page looks good. A pop-up will appear saying, hey, is this page good? And you could click yes or no. And at the end, it'll collect all of that and put that into a test report so that now if, for instance, you're not ready to have automation replace your entire QA team, you can do a combination effort where automation performs a lot of the tedious work, and then a manual tester goes in and says, okay, this page looks good. A manual validation step, for instance, for companies that want to do that. And that became Master QA. And originally it was just a standalone tool, but then it just became much easier to just bake it right into SeleniumBase. And now you can run some of the Master QA examples and try that yourself.
So this might seem like an odd question, but there's so many choices out there that people get overwhelmed. So who would you say this tool is not for? Or who would be not a good candidate to use this tool?
Let's see. If you don't like Python and you don't want to use Python, SeleniumBase is probably not for you. But if you don't mind using Python, then this is definitely the tool you want to use for all your web automation and testing.
So are there any other resources we can point people to learn more about SeleniumBase?
Let's see. I'd basically say I've got a few YouTube videos up, and if you haven't seen those, they walk through a lot of the features that we might not have covered here, such as the SeleniumBase integrations. There's a full tutorial that's about 12 minutes long that I created 5 months ago in I think it was October 2019, that essentially covers a large overview of SeleniumBase features like Master QA, the SeleniumBase command line utility, converting long WebDriver scripts into short, concise SeleniumBase scripts, and a few other things. So a lot of that is covered in the video in case you want to actually see what's going on. If the audience members listening in on this want to see everything work behind the scenes, not just listen to how it works.
Okay, Michael, before we go, is there one piece of actionable advice you can give someone to help them with their automation testing efforts? And let us know the best way to find, contact you, or get started with SeleniumBase.
I'd say just go to the SeleniumBase GitHub page. There's a lot of README files. There's the main README page, and then as you click through the help docs folder, there's a lot of other README files that if you have any questions, you might be able to find your answer there. Because SeleniumBase is a really powerful tool, and I've been using this for many years, and a lot of other companies have also been using this for years because they saw this was the super tool of test automation tools to make it really easy to quickly automate testing. And then a few other features that I didn't cover are that you can automatically detect JavaScript errors with a tool or broken links on a web page, because there is a SeleniumBase method that does that. For instance, check.js, if you run that on the command line with an existing SeleniumBase script, it'll automatically check to see if there are any JavaScript errors on the pages that you navigate to. And if there is anything, it'll mark the test as failed and give you a screenshot. Same with certain 404 errors. There's a broken link, it'll be able to detect it right away. It uses regular Python and the request library that can quickly check the response code of a link. And if it's 404, that means it's a broken link. And we can quickly say, okay, broken link, report on it. And it also combines that with Python multi-threading so that I can check multiple links at the same time, making it function very quickly. SeleniumBase has an account on Twitter, and people can reach out there. Or if there's also a Gitter room, the link is from the SeleniumBase page, where basically a chat room where people go to ask questions, or they might just ask the question by opening a GitHub issue. So lots of different ways to do it. SeleniumBase on Twitter, the Gitter room from the link is on GitHub, or just opening an issue on the SeleniumBase GitHub page. There's a lot of things to cover, and we didn't even cover most of the parameterized testing, multi-threading, and all these other things, but also the ability to read a PDF file and assert that text appears in that. Like, there's so many features, I didn't get a chance to cover everything that's there.
Thank you, Michael, for your automation awesomeness. For links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testguild.com/A296. And while you're there, make sure to click on the Try It for Free Today link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about Sauce Labs' awesome products and services. So that's it for this episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating end-to-end full-stack automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Head on over to testguild.com for full show notes, amazing blog articles, and online testing conferences. Don't forget to subscribe to the Guild to continue your testing journey.